I'm Tim Loughton, Member of Parliament for East Worthing and Shoreham, and I produced another of my podcasts, which I hope you watch and appreciate as a way of getting updates to constituents on key issues. And I thought it was about time I just gave an update on the issue of Europe and Brexit. It's now more than 4 months since the nation voted for the UK to leave the European Union on the referendum we held on June the 23rd. There was a lot of reaction to that vote, we know. Some of it was a bit hysterical. A lot of people thought it was the end of the world, and then all sorts of forecasts and scare stories were made, I have to say, on both sides before the referendum, a very heated referendum debate, and I'm glad to say that the vast majority of those have not come to pass. And there is some good news around, which I think it's worth repeating. It was always going to be a bumpy time, and until we know exactly what the UK's exit package from the EU is going to look like, we won't have that certainty, and uncertainty is something that financial markets, investors, business obviously don't like. So it's not surprising there's been volatility on the financial markets. On the downside, we've obviously seen the pound go down quite a bit against both the dollar and the euro. I think that's been overdone, frankly. I think certainly now the euro is looking very overvalued, and all the problems within the eurozone, particularly with Greece and Portugal and other countries, have not gone away, and I think that's going to resurface soon, and we may see some adjustment. In the meantime, there have been advantages where obviously our exports are looking much more attractive to foreign buyers. Glaxo, a big employer in Worthing, has announced just this week that actually the currency swings have meant that they've made an additional £1 billion, which hopefully they will reinvest in their business and continue to reinvest in Worthing as one of their most important operations in the UK. On the downside, obviously, people going on holiday to the Eurozone and to America, it's going to cost more in the immediate future, and it's likely to filter through to oil prices, petrol prices as well, which are denominated in dollars. But ultimately, these things will sort themselves out. But the good news is that actually exports are now up since the referendum by 3.5% to the EU alone. They're up now by more than 9%. So businesses, and particularly British manufacturing businesses, are doing well. And part of that led to this week's figures of an all-time record of the number of people in employment in this country. 31.8 million people are now in work. That's a growth of 106,000 on the last quarter alone. The average weekly wage has actually been going up at their fastest rate for some time, up 2.3%. Part of that is down to the introduction of the living wage under this government, but also its confidence in businesses. We've seen, despite all the forecasts, house prices actually have been rising at more than 8% now in the August year-on-year figures. And this week also we had the latest GDP figures. That's how fast the economy is growing. It was forecast that it was only going to grow at 0.3%. Some of the more doom-laden forecasts before the referendum said that the economy was actually going to shrink. The figures this week showed the UK economy growing at 0.5%. We are the fastest growing economy this year in all the G7 nations. So the OECD, the IMF, all these experts who were prophesying doom and gloom before the referendum have now had to say actually we were a bit too pessimistic, and they've upgraded their forecast. Now, this isn't going to be easy. Nobody ever said it was going to be easy, and we are going to have a turbulent time. But one important thing that the government has done is to now put a date on when we start the negotiation process. The technical term for it is triggering Article 50 of the Lisbon Treaty, and that starts the process for a member state to negotiate to exit the EU. And we then got a 2-year window to negotiate with our European partners the terms of our exit. Now, all sorts of various alternatives have been bandied around, things like soft Brexit and hard Brexit, or squishy Brexit. I don't know what any of that actually means. But ultimately, what we will achieve, which is what the people voted to achieve, is that the no longer be a member of the EU now by March 2019 at the latest, if we trigger Article 50 in March of next year, as the Prime Minister has indicated. A number of people have written to me saying, why aren't we getting on with it? I'm actually quite relaxed about this, and I'm someone who obviously campaigned hard for a leave vote, because I think it's really important that we make sure we've got good people recruited to carry out what's going to be a very complex negotiation process, that we've got all our ducks in the row, we've got the right agenda, and we know what we want to negotiate for, and that's going to take a little time. Because we've been part of the EU since 1973, we have not had to negotiate any trade deals with other countries for the last 43 years. So we desperately now are having to recruit people with expertise to do this. So we've waited 43 years for this. Those people have not been big fans of our membership of the EU. Waiting a few more months to make sure we get it right, I think, is really important. And I've used this analogy before, that when you've been married for 43 years, going through a difficult breakup is never easy, and all the arguments centre on who gets the dog, what happens to the CD collection, and other things like that. It's going to be a long, hard negotiation, but at the end of the day, it's important to get the very best deal for the United Kingdom, and it's not in the interest of us or the remaining 27 members of the EU if we don't get an amicable deal. There's still a £68 billion trade deficit that we have with the EU, with our biggest trading partner, and if they start cutting up rough and bringing all sorts of tariffs, then they stand to lose the most. And if you take something like the car industry, we are the biggest market in the UK for German cars, particularly high-end German cars. And this week we just had the fantastic news in the last day that Nissan are showing their confidence in the UK post-Brexit by continuing to invest in car making in Sunderland, where they've been since the 1980s, where they produced more than 9 million cars since 1986, exporting those cars to more than 130 countries around the world, and they are going to build their next generation of the X-Trail and the Qashqai, however you pronounce it, in Sunderland. That's a really strong vote of confidence for a really important part of British manufacturing industry. So we want to continue to sell our cars to the EU. The EU will want to continue to sell their cars to us, and it's really important that we get a deal that suits both of us. So that's what the next few months and years are going to be all about. It's not going to be easy, but we've made it quite clear now that the United Kingdom is leaving the EU. I think people who regret that decision, and it's not an easy decision, and I voted for Brexit not with any great alacrity, but for reluctance, simply because I thought the EU is going backwards and is just incapable of reforming itself, and we need to open ourselves up to the other 6.9 billion people who live in countries outside of the EU. Already countries have been flocking to us saying, look, we want to negotiate a trade deal with you. More than 28 countries have already approached us. We can't actually sign any deal until the day after we come out of the EU, but preparations are being made for that. And I leave you one example. I was in Washington and then Mexico recently with the Home Affairs Select Committee, and we spoke to many people in Mexico in particular who were really interested in developing a much closer relationship with the United Kingdom after Brexit. They are the 15th largest economy in the world. They are a G20 member. They are a very important trading partner, and they want to and can do a lot more business with us. They actually vote with us in the United Nations more than any other country in the whole of the UN. They've been sending many of their ministers over. Their Attorney General was over here just a few weeks ago to learn about the political and economic system and the legal system in the United Kingdom. These are the sorts of opportunities that I believe will now come out of that vote on June the 23rd. So we need to be patient, we need to have confidence, and we need to believe in ourselves, because this is going to happen, and I think will just open up huge opportunities If we need to have further public meetings in the constituency, just as I did in the run-up to the referendum, I'm more than happy to do that, and I'll continue to post news as things develop. But the Prime Minister's made clear she's not going to have a blow-by-blow commentary on our negotiating position. We need to make sure we get our ducks in our row and we don't overplay our hand. I'm confident that we'll have the people around the table to get the best deal for the United Kingdom, and that's absolutely what I voted for, and many of you in my constituency did as well.